From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I understand you are here to talk, the comments you wanted to offer are in connection with Class 9, the panel which just concluded about software preservation.
Yes, that's right. And so in particular from my sort of context as a lawyer who works in a library, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear a couple of things about the way libraries use 108 and fair use together. So one thing I wanted to point out was just, so Mr. Williams mentioned, we shouldn't go beyond the realm, or we shouldn't amend 108 or go beyond 108. There's this obsolete formats requirement, and that should be enough. And I just want to make sure, and I know y'all, you print the authoritative version of this stuff, so you have access to the text, but in 108C, there are multiple triggering conditions that permit libraries to do preservation, and obsolete formats is one of those, but we have damaged, deteriorated, lost, and stolen. And there is, in library world, one of the difficulties of 108 is figuring out, how do you handle the fact that you're not allowed to make a preservation copy until something is stolen, right? Or things, that sort of seems absurd. It's gone. How can I copy it? Or it's deteriorating, and in a digital context, that's particularly disastrous. If you were to wait for your digital copy to deteriorate, especially with digital media, it may not be readable at all. You'll put the disc in, and it'll just sort of make a nasty buzzing sound and come back out. So I think it's the general feeling in library world among the folks that I talk to is that we read this provision to permit us to take action with especially unique and rare copies that we don't have to wait for something to become so damaged and deteriorated. We can foresee that a format is of the kind that it's fragile, for example, even if that format isn't obsolete. So the Library of Congress has done studies on optical media, for example, that show that media is much more fragile than we thought. So CDs may not be obsolete yet, but they're quite more fragile than we thought when we first adopted that format in wide distribution. So
it sounds like you are saying for the relevance to the Section 1201 exemption at issue that 108C may prove useful in examining whether there's non-infringing bases.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So there are, other than obsolescence, there are other things in 108C that will be useful to you as you consider whether there's a non-infringing activity here that you should permit under the rulemaking. And then relatedly, I wanted to just mention one case and one bit of legislative history. So the case is Sunderman v. CJs, and that's a fair use case where there was a unique copy of a manuscript that was in the custody of the CJ Society, and a scholar came and wanted to consult that manuscript, and also a buyer came, or a collector, the University of Florida, wanted to also consult the manuscript, and CJ's made copies for each of those people to look at for that scholarly purpose and for that sort of library collection building decision making purpose. And the court said both of those were fair use because the original copy was so rare and fragile, right? You can't give that over to someone and let them walk off with it. They might, it might be harmed, and once it's harmed, it's gone. And again, that fair use logic, I think, is a big part of what I've been working for the last year and change with the software preservation community to help them think through all kinds of things. And I think a lot of them are doing these format migrations because they're in precisely that same position of worrying that we have one copy, we don't know how many other copies there are, and we need to get this off of this media. The media may not be obsolete, the media may not be broken yet, may not be deteriorated yet, but we need to get it off of there, or if it's gone, it's gone. And I think that's something that the court blessed. The legislative history of Section 107 also includes a reference to nitrate film and preservation as, if anything is fair use, this is fair use. And so Mr. Williams mentioned that we don't know whether preservation is fair use, and I think there's actually a much deeper pedigree for preservation as fair use than perhaps many other things. And that's all I wanted to make sure that was in the record.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that case that you're discussing, it almost sounded like you did, if not fitting strictly within the contours of 108, and maybe you two will be excited to continue discussing the discussion document. But
Always excited.
Always. I think we can get it done, much faster than 20, 30 years. But the concept of preservation plus replacement copy, or a lending copy versus preservation copy, it seems like that is sort of fitting in how you describe that case. Would you agree?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Access copies, lending copies, exactly.
Great.
And do you know, with that particular case, what the third parties had to do with their respective copies, like after they decided whether or not to purchase it, or did they have to destroy it? Was that part of the analysis that the court considered?
So I'm not sure what the University of Florida did. I think the scholar might have kept her copy, and I don't. And then also part of the case, the scholar created a presentation and a piece of scholarship, and both of those included excerpts, and the court said all of that was fair use. That's right. Right.
Okay, well, thank you. We really appreciate your perspective and contribution and staying until the end of the day to offer it. So thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
all, and you all for staying. Sorry.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.